Well, this is why what's happening in the world right now is super interesting, because we're essentially dividing the world into two teams. Let's just treat it as it is. Russia has been cancelled. China is seen as its own entity with its own set of rules, its own technologies, its own money. China has been moving off the US dollar. And now Russia's only trading partner, one of their only trading partners really, is going to be China in the short term. Well, Russia's had their assets seized. Are we going to see this opportunity, an opportune moment for China to exert more influence and control around the world, to export their technologies? Will you see an axis of countries, which may include India, Iran, China, Russia, move on to the digital yuan? Who knows? So at that time, and the dollar, the dollar's position as the world reserve currency under threat, and it doesn't feel like the US can turn this around, there's a real opportunity for America to be very pro-Bitcoin. And hopefully freedom money wins against surveillance money.
Well, not only pro-Bitcoin, but pro-advancement of the human condition through technology and individual freedom. Because that, I think, is a larger mission than just Bitcoin. Bitcoin is at the heart of it. Because that will be the long-term response to some of these zones of opposition. So let's imagine, and I love doing exercises with my teams called backcasting, which is where you go out 10 years, 15 years in the future and you say, okay, what kind of world do we want to create? Or do we imagine? And then what would be some of the preceding events that might lead to that? So, Russia and China, and less so China. China has, because they adopted the Great Firewall of China, and because China was so effective at, I think, building cultural terminal uniqueness, the idea that, we are the Chinese nation, we are better than everyone, and everyone else's way of life isn't our way of life. And I think there's a very large part of the population in China. Not all of them, some of the middle class and upper class. But you saw some of the clampdown on that as some of the upper and middle class, recently with entrepreneurs, with Jack Ma, as they had more mobility and they spent more time in the West and they were importing some of that freedom, they had a big crackdown.
Yep.
But in Russia, it's been, call it 20 years, where most Russians under 25, under 30, have never known anything other than this assumed freedom. Yes, there's been one political party. Yes, they know that they don't have the same rights to criticize their government that they may see in America.
But it's better than under the USSR.
Way better than under the USSR. And they've taken a lot of those freedoms as just birthrights. And now that those freedoms are going away, I think Russia has a massive civil war coming on its hands. How that civil war will be played out depends on some of these technologies. So this is where anonymity, mesh networking, encryption becomes so essential, because it's impossible to mount a civil disobedience campaign, even to organize. They were organizing on Facebook, right? That's how they were organizing the protests. Facebook is now gone out of the country.
There's even, I've read in the last week that there may be fundamental changes to the internet within Russia.
Oh yeah, they cut off, top-level domains. They're essentially isolating themselves. But if every single cell phone can be turned on with the right software into a mesh network that can communicate independently, that could be passing on messages in a kind of Tor, pay it forward, anonymous message that never gets routed through the internet. There are so many opportunities to use freedom technologies to build civil disobedience, to put power into the hands of individuals. And Bitcoin's part of that. Bitcoin with satellite being broadcast, Blockstream, is ensuring that you can access, anywhere you are in the world. If you have a satellite dish, you can still get access to your Bitcoin. You can do antenna-based or even broadcast via shortwave radio a Bitcoin transaction. So when you start doing things like Lightning Chat, and you use these same protocols to be able to say, you know what, we could actually communicate. We could organize an army of dissenters, and we could do it in a way that the government has such a hard time tracking, following, and that's just going to increase. With Elon Musk and what he's doing with Starlink, the more we have satellite-based internet, the more we have mesh networking and encryption tools, it should be next to impossible or so hard for a government to squash protest and dissent if we do things right. And so what that means is the cost to autocratic and tyrannical leader should be going up exponentially, while the benefits of adopting that system should be going down just as fast. And part of what will determine that is the speed at which the Western democracies and or what I would consider the more free, not everything is absolute, but the more free societies, the faster they invest in technology. So for instance, let's say that there was a set of medical treatments that was, call it $1 million today, but within 4 or 5 years could be a few $1,000s that will cure you of every single cancer, cure you of all disease, and reverse your aging by around 50%. So your biological age will be able to be rolled back. The companies working on all of these have been funded, and I suspect will exist within 5 years. So this is where I joked before about
you did.
living so long. This is not just a total joke. I mean, there's a startup in Silicon Valley, which is one of 3 that just raised a $2 billion seed round over this new anti-aging technique that they've now done with mice, where they took mice that were literally the biological age of 90, and they turned them into mice who were like 15 years old, with no cancers, with no side effects, and all of them lived.
How?
I can give you the research paper. I believe it's called the Fukuyama.
I probably wouldn't understand it. I probably would want you to translate it.
It's essentially a way of reverting a cell back into its stem cell state, where its aging starts to go back. And when this was first discovered they won the Nobel Prize for it, the scientists. When they first discovered this in 2012, they figured out how to switch these into the stem cell states and reverse aging, but they didn't figure out how to stop it. And so it just kept getting younger.
Like Benjamin Button.
Yeah, and it would develop all these cancers along the way. So they've been working on this for now 10 years, and 2 independent teams have now verified the results that they can do it and stop with no cancers. So this means you could go in and say, you know what? I really love my parents. I want them around for another 40 years. I'm going to pay $50,000 or $100,000 for their anti-aging to wipe out all their disease, and they literally go back to being 20 or 30 years old. What does that do for a nation's economic status? What does that do for its knowledge, its workforce? What if autocratic governments from a certain part of the world were denied access to those treatments? Should they not uphold the Universal Declaration of Human Rights? You want to talk about a sanction? Half the world's living to 300, and you and your citizens can't. Now, they'll try and recreate it. They'll try and steal the technology. But if that's just one of 50 technologies around energy independence, around life extension, around human augmentation and knowledge, around, in all of these areas where we can actually make people's lives fundamentally different on an order of magnitude more, how beneficial is it to be, an oligarch in Russia who has $1 billion when everyone else is living to 300 and are building industries that don't rely on energy or oil at all, and you just saw that your entire income dry up because the world progressed past you? That is what I believe the long-term answer to these things will be, because then it becomes very, very hard for China, for Russia, for some of these countries to tell their citizens,
no,
or, we're still doing good by you.